My name is Mike Paday, class of '89 at the University of Houston, Hilton College grad. I want to welcome you to our webinar this evening that is titled Mental Health and Wellness with our friends from the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences. And I want to introduce them to you. Before I do that, we want to remind you we will have Q&A at the end, so we will have some extra time. We don't have a hard stop at an hour, so if there are questions, we'll try and get everything in by 7:30, but if we go a little bit longer, I know Dr. Walker has agreed that we might have a little time to go. So let me introduce you to my friends who you see on the screen somewhere. First off, I want to introduce to you Dr. Antonio Tillis, who has recently, as of July 2nd, just about 2 weeks ago, been appointed as the interim president of the University of Houston downtown. Congratulations, Dean Tillis. He has previously served as the Dean of Class, which is the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, which you know why I call it class, because I can't say that too many times in an hour, and the MD Anderson Professor of Hispanic Studies at the University of Houston. As the Chief Academic and Administrative Officer of Class, he oversaw 13 academic departments, 10 academic areas and programs, 13 centers, 6 clinical service units, and over 688 faculty members. Class is obviously the largest and most diverse of the 15 academic colleges on the university campus. And we want to welcome Dean Tillis to our screen. I believe he's in the top center of our Hollywood squares here today. Dean Tillis, thank you for being here. I also want to introduce to you one of the other stars of our show, Dr. Rita Walker, Professor of Psychology at the University of Houston, Fellow in the American Psychological Association. She's a licensed psychologist and researcher with more than 60 published scientific papers on African-American adult mental health, suicide risk, and emotional resilience. She's appeared or been cited in the Washington Post, LA Times, Ebony Magazine, CNN Health, the Houston Chronicle, among others. And most recently, she appeared on Good Morning America. Her book, An Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health, explores the Black mental health crisis and gives a comprehensive roadmap to getting the care that so many deserve in an unequal system. So I want to welcome both doctors, Dr. Walker and Dr. Tillis, today. I want to start off with Dean Tillis with a quick conversation about your recent change. So first, thank you so much for leading the class for the last few years, and how excited are you about your recent appointment as the interim president of UH Downtown?
Well, thank you so much, Mike, and good evening to you all. First of all, I must say that to this point in my career, the biggest joy has been serving as the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences. As Mike read off all the specs on the college, I tell people that class, the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, it's a beast. It is a beast with over 600 faculty, with some amazing staff, amazing programs, or over 70 degree granting programs for roughly 12,000 students that are matriculating in them. Classes always in the news these days. Class has an amazing executive director of communications, Tony Mooney-Smith, who makes certain that we are front and center, and a lot of the news media outlets, not just campus-wide and system-wide, but also nationally and internationally. Mike, I want to correct you that we have one star, and that star is Dr. Walker. She is the star for this evening, but class is filled with stars. Class is a constellation in and of itself when it comes to the faculty and the students and the staff, and all are just doing some amazing work. And I must admit that my years at class totally prepared me for this temporary assignment as I have moved downtown to assume the responsibilities as the interim president of the University of Houston Downtown, and to assist the colleagues there as they continue to steer the ship while searching for their new academic leader. So I consider it an honor and a privilege. I love these types of collaborations between the University of Houston Alumni Association and the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences Alumni Association under the helm of Deidre Fontaine. But I would be remiss if I did not say that class is in impeccable hands. Classes in interim dean is Dr. Dan O'Connor, who's on this webinar. And I've had the privilege of working with Dan since coming to the University of Houston, where he was department chair of health and human performances. And then I tapped him out and brought him into the dean's office as associate dean for faculty affairs. And now he's interim dean. So Dan, don't blame me. It's all about your competencies that you displayed that has been a part of all of this. So, you know, I don't know about all of you all, but Dr. Walker, you know, after such a long and stressful day, you know, I'm curious of some suggestions, some suggestions that you would give us on how particularly to unwind after the stressful day. You know, this is Wednesday, it's the hump day. How do we hump over in order to make it through the rest of this week? I think you're muted, Dr. Walker.
Yeah, I bet you can hear me now.
There we go. Perfect.
Thank you so much. First and foremost, I appreciate the invitation from class, from the Alumni Association. I'm glad to be here. And yes, it is the end, presumably, of a work day for a lot of us. And I can actually show you an exercise better than I can tell you. So I know some of you may be eating, those of you who don't have your cameras on, maybe you thought you'd get a snack. Regardless of what your situation is, I'm going to ask you to just bear with me for a moment for one exercise. Give me 3.5 minutes, if you will. And find a seat, if you haven't already, and get a comfortable position in your seat. And when I say comfortable, I mean your back is against the back of the chair, your feet are flat on the floor, they're not crossed at the ankles or anywhere else. Your hands are rested comfortably in your lap or just by your side. And I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. You do not have to watch me. In fact, I'm going to close my eyes. So everyone who can, find a comfortable seated position, eyes closed, back against the back of the chair. Your feet are on the floor, flat, no crossing of the feet or ankles, and your arms and hands are resting comfortably in your lap or by your side. And in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to just take a deep breath. And when I do, you're going to take that breath in through your nose and hold it for as long as you comfortably can. And then you're going to blow that air out through your mouth. So go ahead and do that right here. Take air in through your nose and hold it for a couple seconds comfortably, and then blow all of that air out. And just continue to breathe in that manner, taking air in through your nose and holding it 1, 2, maybe 3 seconds, and then blowing it all of the air out of your mouth. And as you're continuing to breathe, maybe you'll notice what part of your body is moving more. And what I'm looking for here is actually your chest or your belly button. Your belly button's in there somewhere. One of them is moving, either your chest or your belly button. And in a perfect world, as you're continuing to breathe deeply, taking that air in through your nose and blowing it out through your mouth, your tummy is actually what's moving the most. And I know it's not comfortable for a lot of us, but just practice taking air in through your nose, pushing your stomach out as if it's a balloon, and then blowing all of that air out, and then your tummy coming back in, even if it's only a little bit, because you've expelled all of that air out through your mouth. Continue to breathe deeply, if you will, and as you're doing so, just notice if you have any tightness in your neck. Notice if you have any tightness in your left shoulder or your right shoulder, and as you're breathing deeply, tell yourself when you exhale to let go of that tension in your left shoulder, in your right shoulder, in your neck. As you're continuing to breathe deeply, notice your low back. It's a really popular place to carry tension and tightness. And as you're breathing deeply, tell yourself to release that tension. As you exhale, blowing out all of that air, you're releasing that tension and tightness. Notice a couple other places in your body where you might be holding some tension. It could be your right hip or your left hip, or your right wrist, or your left wrist. As you're continuing to breathe deeply, tell yourself to release that tension and tightness as you blow all of that air out of your mouth. Maybe there are some other places where you carry tension. Maybe in your knees, the front of your knee, the back of your knee. Check both knees. Notice if there's any tension in there. And as you do, and you're taking that air in through your nose and blowing it out through your mouth, tell yourself to release all of that tension. And in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to take 3 very deep breaths. Remember, you're taking the air in through your nose and holding it, blowing it out through your mouth. Go ahead and take the first deep breath here. In through your nose and holding it and blowing all of that air out through your mouth. Go ahead and take the second, remembering to hold it for just a moment or two and blowing it out through your mouth. And as you take this last deep breath here, in through your nose and holding it and blowing all of that air out, tell yourself to release all of the tension out through the bottoms of your feet. Okay, you can go ahead and open your eyes if you're still with me. What we did just now was a variation of a deep breathing exercise that's called diaphragmatic breathing. Diaphragmatic breathing is important because over time, we get lazy about our breathing as adults. But if you've ever noticed a baby in a crib and they're breathing, their tummy is expanding and getting really big, and then it goes all the way down. That's the way we're supposed to breathe. And the thing about our psychological health and our physical health in getting lazy about breathing, we have to give our bodies time to reset a little bit. Some of you know a little bit about this. It's, you heard about the fight or flight system or fight, flight, freeze. Your body doesn't know what all is going on. Your body doesn't technically know about coronavirus. Your body only knows what your mind is saying. Can I manage this? Can I not? And if your mind is saying I can't, then it's tensing up. And when you do diaphragmatic breathing, it just gives you an opportunity to be able to relax and reset. And you can do it any time of day. You can do it anytime. You can do it during a road rage situation in Texas, though you don't want to close your eyes, but you can do it any time to just give yourself a moment to reset. So I hope that was helpful for some folks.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Walker. I'm really going to have to remember that tonight when I get ready to go to bed. Also, Dean O'Connor, you may want to remember this on those Wednesday mornings before you have that staff meeting with everyone. So just to dive in, so Dr. Walker, Houston and around the world, we're all embroiled in this pandemic. It's at every news media. We hear about it constantly. It actually has subsumed most of our lives. Can you give us some tips on how to deal with this and how to deal with some of the stress and anxiety that comes along with this pandemic?
Absolutely. I think we first have to recognize that in so many ways, a lot of us are like on hamster wheels. We're just going and going and going. And I think that when we first heard like, okay, stay at home, we thought, okay, things would kind of relax a little bit. But it's been the opposite. And we have to be more intentional. Well, actually, first, we want to cut ourselves a little bit of slack because we can't always sustain at a high level. And so when we tell ourselves, like, I got to do this thing and that thing, and I have to do all the things at the same time and at a high level, some of us are probably already realizing it's not manageable. And that's okay. So what we can do, with the information that we have is recognize, okay, I can get through the next 5 minutes, or maybe I can get through the next hour, because part of the challenge is what we're telling ourselves about, oh my goodness, I can't do this for another week. I can't get through the fall semester, because we know that there's going to be a lot of adjustments that need to be made. And if we can tell ourselves instead, okay, I can get through the next hour, I can do this. What do I need? It allows every single individual to figure out for themselves, okay, what do I need for the next hour? Do I need to go sit down somewhere? Do I need to avoid, emails for a little while? What do I need to do for myself in order to be able to manage? I talked about the deep breathing exercise. Sometimes it helps. So one of the reasons that helps is because it takes us out of these really very stressful situations. If you're focused on your breathing and you've got your posture right and you're trying to get it just right, you're not thinking about that stressful thing. You're not thinking about the news. You're not thinking about what the 10-year-old is doing to the 4-year-old. You're just taking one moment by one moment. And I really do believe that that's the best that we can do right now. But we have to be intentional and decide that that's what we're going to do.
Dr. Walker, speaking of the 10-year-old, the 4-year-old, the 2-year-old, and the newborn, many of our colleagues who are at home are parents. So what type of suggestions would you give to those colleagues who are trying to be productive, trying to continue with their work functions, but also have to deal with their family and their children?
Yeah, no, parents are having a time right now, and I'm one of them. And it's because there's so many different things, as you know, like they're pulling us in so many different directions and seemingly at the same time. And how do you manage that? And I want to be clear that where we are in multiple pandemics, it's a lot. Like, we're not expected to be able to manage all of the stuff. And that's why I said, we got to give ourselves a little bit of a break. I really do believe that it helps to just have a shift in perspective. So in a lot of ways, and I mentioned earlier, the things that we tell ourselves about what we're supposed to be able to do. I think that we can add, one of the things that we tell ourselves is that those kiddos who are getting on each other's nerves and then getting on my nerves, or that one kiddo who's saying, I need you to help me right now, and they're just getting all flustered, that they're having a tough time too. And when we can acknowledge they're having a tough time, and that's a shift from they're getting on my last nerve, that we can come up with some things maybe to be helpful. And we can shift to, okay, how can I, lean into this child and be more loving and nurturing of them right now? I don't know if it'll work. I'll be quite honest. But what we have to do is to do something different, especially for folks who are struggling. If what you've been doing isn't working, then you can experiment. Try something new. Kids are screaming, give everybody a popsicle. The look on the face when children are acting out and they know they're acting out, and you give them a treat or a popsicle, that entertains me for at least the next half hour, just to get a different kind of reaction. Because they're trying to figure out, okay, what just happened? And you actually buy a little bit of time for yourself just by doing something different. And so if nothing else, if what you've been doing isn't working, then try the exact opposite maybe of what you're doing. And I recognize that they're not even just children at home, but some folks have children at home and parents at home that they're trying to take care of. If you can, figure out ways to help the child and the parent, your parent or parents, work together. Because sometimes they can help soothe and calm and reassure each other in a way that you as the frazzled person in the middle just can't do.
That's absolutely great. Dr. Walker, also, I want to join Mike Paday in congratulating you on your most recent work. If I remember correctly, it came out on the 1st of June this summer, the Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. So as a literary scholar and one who really pays attention to certain types of titles, what makes this work unapologetic?
Well, it's unapologetic for two reasons. And the first is that I do center the conversation on African Americans. And that's something that doesn't commonly happen. Oftentimes, we lump Black folks in with everybody and say all the minorities. And the reality is that African Americans do have a relatively different history, having gone through chattel slavery and navigating what it means to be a citizen in these United States, because of a lot of the internalized racism that occurred seemingly a long time ago, but really wasn't that long, it factors into the psychology of persons of African descent in the US and, in other parts of the world. And so first and foremost, I needed to be able to have that conversation to recognize and acknowledge the impact of racism that a lot of people of African descent, particularly African Americans, have had to navigate and not even realizing the toll of doing that. So that's one part. The other part is that part of the survival of Black people in the US has meant, relying on spirituality and religiosity in a lot of ways. And I 100% get that. But it has oftentimes, I truly believe undermined in a lot of ways the ability to be able to say, get professional help. So someone, as an example, says, I'm just so overwhelmed and depressed, and I think, I might need to talk to someone. And the response might be, go pray about it, talk to the Lord. And I'm thinking, well, can you pray about a mental health professional? Because the conversation seems to end with prayer and going to church. And for a lot of serious problems, people need much more than prayer. And I tackle that in the book, and I don't apologize for it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thinking about, my own upbringing, and I'm sure many who have joined us probably have the same type of cultural upbringing, when mental health was something that we just didn't talk about. And it was something that we just didn't know much about. Does your research reveal that within the African American community, that mental health and having open and honest conversations about mental health is beginning to become more normative than when we grew up? Assuming that we're the same age, I don't know.
No, I'm going to rebuke that. No, I'm kidding. I think that it's probably more so anecdotal to some degree, and it's interesting because what I have noticed, as an example, on Instagram, and I've developed some Instagram following, is that a fair ratio of the people who are following me are still mental health professionals. Because there's still a lot of folks who see mental health as something, unfortunately, for crazy people. In fact, I had a relative to tell me that, my uncle, who read the book because he was proud of his niece and just wanted to see what the college girl, that's what he calls me, the college girl was talking about. And he actually messaged me and said, oh my goodness, this book is for everybody. And I didn't even realize it. And that's why I wrote the book, so that people who weren't previously thinking about mental health can realize that we all need our minds in order to be able to function. So while it seems like there is a lot more openness, I think because of, some of the popular TV shows that people are talking about their therapists, that we see people embracing, this idea of mental health, even for Black people and for other marginalized persons, that it seems okay, that there's still this notion that mental health is for somebody else. And, it's one of the things that I actually try and shift in the book, intentionally so, because again, we all need our minds. We can't go to work or do well in class or classes or take care of families or even, subscribe to, like, what is the reason we're here? Because we're all, again, hamsters on a wheel, just going through the motions, and we have to be more intentional about our well-being.
That's great. Another concept that rose out of your book is the idea of psychological fortitude. Can you unpack that for us a bit? And also, can you tell us, how do we determine our own psychological fortitude?
Well, psychological fortitude was my actual specific strategy for kind of taking hold of this idea of mental health. And I'll tell you, I did not want to even put mental health in the title of the book. And the publisher said, well, if we don't put it in the title, then people won't know to look for it. And I said, but people aren't looking for mental health. Like that's the whole argument I've been trying to make. And so at the beginning of the book, I start talking about this idea of psychological fortitude so that we can leave behind this idea of mental health. People hear mental and they just immediately check out. So I'm actually really excited to see or hear that so many folks registered and that folks are here for this conversation, because psychological fortitude is the 0 to 10 rating of your ability to be able to take care of yourself. And when you're taking care of yourself, that's your health, that's going to work and making a living, that is passing classes, and maybe even making dean's lists. Ooh, isn't that wonderful? Doing all those things, but doing them recognizing that there are threats to being able to achieve those really important goals in our lives. And I talk about it in the context of African Americans because some of those threats look like things that other folks just do naturally. So as an example, when I think about Ahmaud Arbery, who was out jogging, like jogging for his health. I can't jog. I don't jog. I can't run to the mailbox in the winter. But there are people who take care of themselves, presumably by going for a run. And Mr. Arbery didn't make it home. And so recognizing that I've got to live my life and be the best person that I can, while there may be folks who are challenging, what it is for me or the fact that I'm in the room as an African-American person. And so it's kind of like this tightrope. And so if the psychological fortitude, the 0 to 10 rating of your ability to be able to do well is at a 7, 8, 9, 10, okay, that's pretty good. I mean, 9 and 10, that's superb. 9 and 10 during multiple pandemics, please put your name in the comments here. I'd like to meet you. But 7 or 8 right now is pretty good. When you start to fall, I'd say, 6, 5, 4, then it's time to do something different that I was talking about earlier, making some adjustments. Folks who fall at about a 3 or lower, and it can shift, right? So maybe most days you're at an 8 and you have a moment where you're at a 3. Okay, that's fine. But if you're landing at about a 3 and you've been there for months or even years, it's probably time to see a professional and talk to someone about that. The 0 to 10 rating is really easy because it gives you much more information than someone saying like, hey, Dr. Tillis, how are you doing? And you say something like, this is audience participation. Okay, you got your mute on.
I'm muted. I was muted. I'm fine, Dr. Walker. How are you?
And that's so common. People just say, I'm fine. But you give a 0 to 10, that gives a lot more information. Yeah. And it's so accessible. My child used it on me. He didn't say psychological fortitude, but his parents are psychologists, so it's not his fault. So I was not feeling well. It was actually food poisoning a few months ago. And he was trying to figure out whether or not he stayed and helped me or go play video games. I saw the calculation in his mind, on his face. And he said, well, on a 0 to 10, how bad are you feeling? I kid you not. For a moment, I forgot that I was feeling bad because I was so surprised that my 9-year-old son was asking me basically for my PF rating. And so you can ask anyone. And that's what makes it so helpful because once you have a rating, you know what to do. You call your girlfriend, she doesn't sound so good. And you say, what's your rating on a 0 to 10, 0 being not so good at all and 10 being great. And she gives you a rating. You don't have to even know what all is going on. You don't have to tell your business. But and now I'm switching it's the end of the day. But at the end of the day, for me, with the 0 to 10 rating, we decide if the person's okay, or maybe I can help them, to feel a little bit better just by having a conversation, maybe just a conversation like this.
Wow, this is great. Dr. Walker, I can go on and on and on with the questions because there's so many that I have, but I don't want to take up too much more time because I'm sure for those that have joined the webinar that there are quite a few other questions. So I'm going to now pass the baton to Mike Paday, such that Mike can field questions from those who are also here on the webinar. Mike?
Thank you, Dr. Tillis. I appreciate it. And yes, I was worried about 6 minutes ago that we didn't have any questions, and now my worries are gone. We have plenty of questions. I have a couple that I received early that I got privately. So I will, and I think it's because they sent them privately to one of our staff who forwarded them to me. So the first one I got was, how does someone get, quote, comfortable in discussing mental health with a family member?
I'm going to interpret that question as one that I have heard a few times. Okay. And my interpretation of it is, how do you tell somebody they need to get some help? It is the single most common question that I get. And how do you tell them when you pretty much already know that they are averse to getting help? And the short answer, unfortunately, is that you can't. Think about somebody trying to get you to do something you don't want to do. It's the same thing for that other person. What I advise is to let them know that you have a concern, whatever the concern might be. I notice whenever we talk, you just seem, stressed out all the time. Or I notice that, it seems like maybe you're not getting enough rest. So be honest, whatever the thing is that you see or observe, then you say that, because you're only responsible for you. You can't be responsible for them, what they say, how they react, etc. The reason that you're doing that, though, is because they know at least that you're paying attention and that you care. And when they're ready, guess who they'll talk to? The people who've been telling them what to do, or the person who seems like they just genuinely care about how they're doing?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Excellent answer. Thank you so much. Okay. Dr. Linda Reed, I'm starting to feel a little inadequate here not being a doctor on this call. There seems to be a lot of them, but she has asked a question: as police departments around the USA initiate reforms to address many of the questions related to issues raised by Black Lives Matter and protesters in the last couple of months, where should the subject of mental health be placed in the priority of their reforms?
Yeah, that one's got a few layers to it, Dr. Reed, as you probably know. We're fortunate in Houston. I will say that we have the crisis response unit that can go out with police officers, and they are trained. So they are police officers who are paired with trained social workers who can help to address specific mental health kinds of concerns. And to my knowledge, Houston is one of the few major cities, metropolitan areas that has something like that. And because we have so few options for mental health care that started in the 80s, and we had fewer and lesser resources over the years, that we absolutely need to have more funding that's directed towards having someone who is trained in mental health care. Because yeah, a good proportion, I think right now, my understanding is, as an example, the jail in Houston is one of the largest providers of mental health care in Houston. And something about that surely doesn't seem right. And we really need to invest in the people who are trained to address these kinds of challenges head on, rather than incarcerating people, who have psychological deficits.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask this next one from Cheney Leday. I think I said that right, as somebody whose last name gets mispronounced all the time. Cheney, I hope I got that right. And this one's pretty topical because this has been happening in the last 48 hours. As the children have watched the peril of the pandemic, specifically the notion of where racism intersects with the pandemic, how can PK through 12 educators, teachers and leaders, unpack what our children have experienced over the past 5 months? And might I add a second question? They've now been told we're going to keep doing this for another month or two in some of the other school districts. So how do we unpack what children have experienced over the past 5 months, and looking forward to at least another couple of at least staying home for education?
One of the reasons, it actually goes back to one of the reasons that I wrote the Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health, because I've actually been observing a crisis with African American youth with untreated and unaddressed depression and anxiety. And my idea about that is that the adults who are responsible, who are in charge, may not be as accessible and as supportive of those youth. And so we start to see some of those challenges escalate. I think that when children ask questions, we have to be there for them, and we have to be extra sympathetic for where they are. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the youth who are struggling, that we have to just shift our perspective, because again, we're in crisis. I don't know what that means for everyone, but it absolutely means that we have to do things differently, and it's not business as usual. And I'd probably actually also call on some of my child psychologist friends who do actually treat children and youth, who'd be able to address that also. But I think starting with the adults, we have to have a different perspective, and recognizing that we're in crisis and being available to those youth. And so when we say, go sit down somewhere or leave me alone with all those questions, that actually escalates angst and anxiety. Whereas when we give them an opportunity to share what's going on with them, and maybe, the 2 and 3 year olds, they don't know yet, the 5-year-old knows that they're not going to first grade next year. Have them write and draw pictures so that they can express what they're going through. And if they want to draw 15 or 20 pictures in a day, great. Take great pride in those pictures so that you can balance out some of the negative emotionality that children are feeling.
Thank you so much. I'm excited I got to see my friend Connie Kemp's face a couple times this week, and she has a question. Hi, Connie. How do you break the chain of how you were raised as African Americans relating to keeping our business, parentheses, feelings, insecurities, and self-esteem issues to ourselves? I believe that most of us are depressed, and because of our upbringing, we deal with it internally and suffer silently. What is your advice?
So can my first advice be to get a copy of the book?
Of course.
Because this is one of the things, this is one of the reasons that it's unapologetic, because I get it. I grew up in a family, like imagine growing up in a family, and I was one of the ones who was told, you know, you can't be in grown folks conversations, go sit down somewhere. And then I get a PhD and I'm trying to be helpful and I'm still being told to go sit down somewhere and don't use that psychology stuff on us. It goes back to the conversation earlier where when people aren't ready to start to do more and do things differently, and notice I didn't say do better, I said just do things differently, because I think we can't undo or completely neutralize what got us here. And what I mean by that is, you know, Black folks in the US have been trying to survive for generations, still trying to survive. Breonna Taylor still trying to get justice, or her family still trying to get justice. And so survival has in part been about keeping your business to yourself, you know, keeping things private and secret, because when it gets out, you don't know who you can trust. So the privacy and the secrecy in a lot of ways is adaptive, because if you talk to the wrong folks, then, you know, generations ago, you could literally die. And so right now, I think recognizing that there are different kinds of discriminations, and those types of discriminations don't keep someone from getting mental health help, or they don't keep someone from saying, you know what, I'm struggling a little bit. Can we at least just talk? Or we don't have to talk about what's going on. Let's go get lunch so I can get my mind off of things. That when we recognize, you know, we've got to do some things differently, and we open ourselves up to a different approach, I do think that things will start to shift. It really is why I wrote the book, because the train that we're on, it's not going in the right direction.
So again, we have time for maybe a few more questions in the queue, because I have a couple that also came in privately as well. So we've talked a lot about group setting issues with mental wellness of families together and generations living together. I have one about the opposite. In this current pandemic environment, without social interaction, what tools can those who are single use to socialize with friends and family in a virtual setting?
Yeah, again, I think recognizing that like pandemic, and for those, I think most of the folks here are in Houston, and Houston has a problem, and that means we have to get extra creative. And I think it's nice when we can schedule, you know, happy hour Zooms, and, you know, we can get together with folks. I think honestly, some folks are probably just over it right now, but especially when folks are struggling, I think it's okay to just dial somebody up. You know, if you have I know that I'm an Android person, so I know folks who have an iPhone use a different app, but call them up and use the video function just for fun, just to do something different, not a scheduled call, just I need to hear a different voice. Would it be nice to be able to get out? Yeah. And if that is important, though you can't do it when the sun is up in Houston, you got to go out at night when the sun is down, but just doing something different, you know, walking down the street in case there's a neighbor, just to shift things a little bit. Now, is that perfect? Absolutely not. But is it going to give you a few minutes where you just have some, you know, relief before you go back into your apartment or your home or wherever you're living?
One thing that serves as a nice stress breaker for me is watching my parents and grandparents use Zoom. If you're watching them talk while it's connected and they can't get connected, that's a nice relief for me to just watch them with technology. Sometimes it's not exactly the release we were all looking for, but it does add some comic relief to the moment, you know. And they try new things. Okay, so I have a couple more here. Charmaine asks, she has a scenario for you. My sister, who lives alone, and I have instituted driveway meetings. We may sit in her double driveway side by side in our retrospective cars and roll down the windows to talk, or I sit in my car while she stands in her yard. I use the same process for others. Our group of friends are meeting far apart. And she's also found that sitting in her car alone in the front of her garage or in the back is a great escape. So what about just, I guess the comment here would be to my question, how do you just decompress yourself? You know, where you do before you go in and meet the family, before you go in and have the meeting, before you get back onto the Zoom. You gave us the breathing technique at the beginning of our Zoom today, but is there another exercise you can give us to decompress ourselves, to not carry the last Zoom into the next Zoom, or the last frustrating moment into the next frustrating moment?
Well, you know, actually one thing that comes to mind that is easy for anyone, and maybe it's not in the middle of the day or between Zoom meetings per se, though I will say one option between Zoom meetings, if you have a favorite song, whatever that is, play it. I mean, most songs are 3, 4, 5 minutes. Like, just play your favorite song at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. Because one of the things that we do, which I always find fascinating, or I used to find fascinating, is that people get into their shower and they go to work. It's like getting in the shower with your clothes on, which no one would do. But when I say go to work, people literally start thinking about what they're going to do that day or what didn't go right that day. And they go to work in the shower. But we don't get to go to the spa, or most folks aren't going to a spa. I don't even know if the spas are open. I've been in the house since March. But when you take your shower, just be in the shower. Feel the warm water and don't think about a thing. Now, for some folks, you'll do this right away. For others of you, you'll get out the shower after you've done your work in the shower. And you're like, oh, that was supposed to be that opportunity. That's fine. Try again next time. Like, we really can, you know, take it easy on ourselves. If we don't get this stuff right the first time, just keep at it. It'll kick in sooner or later. It'll kick in when you're ready.
You'll also notice, folks, in the chat that we have put the link to Dr. Walker's book there. If you'd like to get her book, we have put the link in the chat for you. And so I had one more question on my side phone over here. We do have a few. Here's one from Anika really quickly. Is having a good cry good for your mental health?
Yes.
There you go.
Do I need to say more?
No.
Whatever you need to do, because this is the thing. We oftentimes just keep stuff in. We keep it in, we keep it bottled up, and that's also not good for you physically. I talk to students about this idea of withheld communication. So we keep things on the inside. You know, some things, you know, we keep on the inside so we can keep our job, but other things are important for us to be able to get out. And if your body is feeling like, I just can't take this anymore and I need a good cry, then go ahead and cry. And I bet you'll actually feel better afterwards.
Thank you so much. I had one on the side as well. We probably have time for one more question in the chat if you'd like to add it. I had one for those of us who are managing other people on our teams. The question is, are there some identifiers for somebody who might be struggling with a higher anxiety level than they realize, or are there some signals that might help you as the boss manage your team in this era of working from home, trusting people that they're getting done, you know, some of that difficulty of working from home and dealing with your boss and dealing with folks that you manage? Are there some techniques there that you can decompress them with just the way you talk or the way you act or the way you approach them?
I will say I applaud the person who asked the question, because it probably demonstrates a certain level of insight or something that they have noticed. So kudos to that person. One thing I assume is that they notice maybe a shift in behavior. And that's the single easiest thing that you can do for coworkers, members of the team, family members, you know, the kids at the house, for anyone, noticing a shift in behavior. So that shift could be that they seem just a little bit more lethargic than usual. Now, some of you would say, well, they're moving slow and they're overwhelmed because coronavirus. That could be the case, but it's worth making an observation like, hey, I noticed that, fill in the blank, whatever it is that you notice. And when you do that, you do want to be careful about your language because you don't want to include the, I guess, the judgy, evaluative language. Like, I noticed you were messing up. Like, no, that wouldn't be helpful. But if you notice, hey, typically you'd be able to turn things around, and I noticed it's been, lagging a little bit. It could be because coronavirus. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. And it's a very straightforward, you observe the facts only, ma'am. And then you communicate that it's just something you observe and just say, how you been doing?
I did it myself and hit the mute button. See, none of us are immune from it. Dean Tillis, we can all talk while we're muted. Any ideas on how we can provide some preventative therapy for youth during this time of social isolation?
Well, there are, teletherapy is available. Most providers have shifted to teletherapy. I imagine that there is also like group support. And I know there are a couple organizations in Houston. I apologize, I can't say the names right now. I'd have to circle back because I've seen them on Facebook. But it is helpful to be able to have some support, some, I guess, anticipatory support. I know as an example, my child's anticipatory support is video games. Like that's his life. And I struggled with that for a little while because as a psychologist, I'm like, you are not supposed to be doing this much video games. But he's connecting with his friends. And I do think it helps to have some flexibility, try to balance it as much as possible. Like, can you go read for 20 minutes, please, in the middle? Because some children will find ways to do what makes sense to them. As long as they're not in danger, then parents can try and balance that a little bit. But there are some groups that are available online, and I can try and look those up, right after we finish today and share those with you if that would be helpful, Nate.
That'll be great. And we can put those, when we record this, we always list some of the resources on our page next to the recording of the webinar. So if you'll get that for us, that would be fantastic. Okay. So we have one more question, and then I'm going to introduce one more guest. So an uncomfortable truth in these concerning times is the fact that none of us know when the pandemic will end. And if you do, please tell us. That would be helpful. Do you have any specific strategies to deal with uncertainty while maintaining our sanity in the process?
Well, the professional in me would advise that we seriously think about what are those greatest fears? Because in fact, it's the things that we're telling ourselves that exasperate our anxiety, right? Like, I can't do this for forever. I can't do this for another year. And the reality is that we don't know. And so we have to be careful about what we're telling ourselves rather than focusing on, okay, day to day, week to week. Like, let's be intentional and strategize about what we know is coming. I absolutely get it. Like, we want control. Like, we want absolute control over our lives. Like, who doesn't? And the pandemic has taken that away. I love going to HEB. I love HEB very much. And one of my things that I did, pre-pandemic was to, I would go look at Primo Picks and I would talk to the people who are, the ladies who are making little meals and things. And I don't get to do that anymore. And I know that at some point I will. I don't know when that is. So maybe what are some of the things that we can do to substitute, create novel activities for ourselves? I know some people are starting to garden. I told myself I was going to garden. It hasn't worked out so much. But what are some of the things that we always wanted to do that no, we're not going to do between now and when school starts, to be honest? I mean, we have to be honest with ourselves. But maybe we can break down, for me, because I'm planning to do this actually next week. Okay, if I want to start a garden, what all do I need to do? Like, tiny step by tiny step. And I'm going to focus on that rather than focusing on when is this ever going to end because I can't take it anymore. Because if I can distract myself with something productive, like being able to grow some food, like that will replace that negative anxiety with something much more adaptive and psychologically healthy.
Well, this has been so fantastic. I hope all of you will help me thank Dr. Walker and Dean Tillis for hosting this to this evening with so much incredible information. I'll have a last word in a second, but I want to introduce Dan O'Connor, who's at the bottom of my screen, who wore a suit jacket to our webinar today, which I'll give him a hard time about later on. But I want to take him off of mute and give him some words about what's going on in class now and how you're going to hitch your wagon to this shooting star at the top of my screen to make sure we get to hear more great things from Dr. Walker. So Dan, I'll give you a few moments. Make sure you unmute yourself first.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Well, I'm a native Houstonian, so all native Houstonians know that you're colder inside in July than you are outside in January, right? You have to have the air conditioner low, so you got to jack it up. No, seriously, though, first of all, Dr. Walker, that was tremendous. I mean, you're not only providing information, but tools and strategies, which is sorely needed these days. I fortunately don't have any stress because the college was left in such good a position by Dean Tillis, but you know, for those of us who are experienced, right now, it's really those are very helpful tips, and I found it very useful myself. Some of them are very quick tips. The breathing I've always heard, but I haven't thought about it lately. That's something you can do during the day that helps relieve. So again, outstanding. And everyone can see that she's not a rising star, she's a risen star. She's obviously at the top of her game and leading in her profession and her discipline. And one of class's outstanding faculty members. We have many, and we will be hearing from many of them during this year. We have a lecture series that we're planning, that Dean Tillis initiated, and we're continuing through with that planning, and Dr. Walker and others may be part of that. So we certainly can share that with the Alumni Association as those are set up. I want to thank President Tillis for joining us. He's not technically on assignment at the University of Houston, but he graciously agreed to continue his commitment to this forum to moderate it. And of course, he helped in the planning with the UH Alumni Association. So again, thank you for your time. I know your time is busy and short, so we appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Dan, and thank you, Mike. And just one point of clarification, that's interim president.
We're all pulling for a part of that sentence to go away. Let's just say that.
Interim dean, interim. When are you coming back? Anyway, so and Mike, a good friend. I've known Mike a pretty long time now. And we hang out at graduation ceremonies together in the back room before we go on stage, and etc. But thanks to you and to the Alumni Association for inviting class to partner and participate in this. It's a great venue, and we're glad to help contribute in the future to these events. And then, of course, to all of the attendees, people participating and contributing questions and watching and listening, and particularly our alumni. We really look forward to being able, again, to share, as we do these events, the Alumni Association and class and other units and University of Houston, to share the events and what's going on. And you can see, again, the tremendous work that's being done at the university, and we're happy to have you continue to participate in that. And just in closing, again, I really enjoyed the whole presentation from Dr. Walker, and we're happy. Again, class has many leading scholars. We have what I consider to be all of the leading scholars with the current topical information in the University of Houston, actually. And so we're planning events around those topics and using our scholars and perhaps bringing in others to have these productive types of conversations that when you walk away, hopefully not only you've learned something, but you've learned something you can do that leads to betterment. So again, I appreciate it, Mike, and I hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Dan. Dean Tillis, thank you so much. Good luck in your new role. Hopefully that goes well. And Dr. Walker, I know that I can walk outside tonight and look in the northwest sky at dusk and see a comet, but I won't see anything as brightly as shown tonight when you were on our screen. So I really appreciate that. And we really appreciate your time, and we look forward to doing more things with class. I want to thank all of you for attending today. I want to thank Deidre Fontaine for driving force of helping us put this together. I want to thank my team in the Alumni Association who scans your comments and puts up links, and Kendra Hackinson makes this thing go, and I want to thank all of them for doing it. This is recorded. Please tell your friends to go ahead and watch it. It doesn't cost anything. It'll be at houstonalumni.com/webinar. It's going to be right there, obvious. give us till tomorrow, but we're very proud of this. And we thank you all so much for attending tonight. And we hope you all have a wonderful evening. Stay safe out there. Wear a mask. I tell my friends, if you don't want to teach middle school at home, wear a mask. I've got a lot of friends with small kids. There's a way to fix that. If you don't want to be a homeschool teacher, wear a mask. So thank you all so much for being here tonight. Have a great rest of your week. And as we always do at the end of these, go Cougs. Thank you so much.